What up everybody? So I got another video for you guys, and I've actually ordered a ton of parts for the car.
Hot diggity dog!
Just to keep me busy over the winter here in Wisconsin. And I'll show you guys most of the parts that I've gotten right now. There are still some parts that have to be delivered, but today, as you can see from the title of the video, I'm gonna be focusing on the BC Racing BR Coilovers. What I'm thinking is, I'm gonna actually start in the rear. I know a lot of people usually start with the fronts. Even before I do that, while the coilovers are off the car, I'm going to go ahead and adjust them to max height, just because these Wisconsin roads are really rough, and I already have a little bit of trouble with the setup that I have right now. I'm going to go max height on the BC Racing coilovers, and if I ever want to adjust, I can go from there. That's what we're going to be doing first. So here are the coilovers, and here are some other parts that I have. Right now, let's get these coilovers unpackaged and just get a good look at them. All right, guys, so there they are. We got the rear shocks, front coilovers, springs, sway bar end links. So we got everything here. And as you can tell here, these are way off. They're completely different sizes. So like I said, it's better to just do them off the car right now and adjust the sizes. And we're just going to go to stock height. And like I said before too, we are going to start with the rear first. Right now I have the car up on the ramps. So the front end is up in the air a little bit. We're going to go ahead and jack up the rear end and put some jack stands underneath. And then just get started by unbolting the wheels and starting off the project with one side, unbolting everything that's on there right now. So guys, I have the wheel off now, and you can see where the spring is here, and then the shock, and then it's just one bolt there. But before we do anything over here, I have to remove some of the trim in the trunk of the car, which we'll get to. But I wanted to explain something a little more on this end. So as you guys know, we have the shock right here, and then these adjustable springs. So as I was reading up on these, because I am definitely not an expert, this is my first set of coilovers, and also the first time I've ever installed coilovers. I've done regular suspension before, but not coilovers. You can see here the adjustable top hat, I guess you would call it, or perch. Not sure of what the exact name is.
Go, you know the thing.
But you can see all the threads there on both ends. And then this bottom collar here is the one that you loosen. So you can spin the threads on this and adjust the ride height. Here. It's not very tight right now, but here we go. So now we can adjust it, and you can see there it fell right off because I didn't really have it in there too much. It wasn't threaded on all the way. But the important thing that I wanted to mention to you guys, and those of you that live in areas where the roads are really bad and you're trying to get close to stock height, it says that you should at least have 25 millimeters threaded in. So don't have it all the way threaded off like I just had it. I'm going to go ahead and thread it up all the way up to the top here, just so I can see one line of threads, or thread, I should say. And then once I have it there, we'll keep going. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure to make sure that both of these are the same thread height, but we'll get to that. I'm skipping around here a little bit. But there you can see that it's close to almost showing a thread line there. It's hard to do this and film at the same time, but I want to explain this as best as I can. So there I can go ahead and turn this counterclockwise and lock it. So right now I'm just showing you guys, but the correct way that I'm going to do it off camera is I'm going to measure from the bottom to the top of the collar here and make sure that I have the same height as the other one before I even put them on, just because it'll make it easier. But there you guys can see that it's pretty close to the other one right now. I just wanted to show you guys. But this is how they will mount on the car. So this will be on top. As you can see from the red tape here, that's basically what it's trying to tell you. I just wanted to note that to you guys really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera and make sure that these are aligned perfectly so that they're the same height. But like I previously said as well, you can do this while they are on the car, so you don't have to worry about that. I just wanted to kind of get a head start on it, which you guys can do as well. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and start removing the liner on this side, and I'll show you guys here. I'll open the trunk just so you guys can see. All right, I'll show you what push pins I removed, or whatever they're called. There's one over here, one right there, one over here, one right there, and yep. Actually, I did miss one. One down there, you can see the hole right there. So all of those removed just give you a little bit of space to get this other trim out. But like other people said, you do actually have to move the convertible hardtop to get to the last push pin in the back. So I just wanted to show you guys which ones I removed so far, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, just because if I have the top adjusted, I can just do both sides right now rather than having to do it all over again. So once I get this side done to the point where I just need to remove that last pin, I'll go ahead and retract the top and show you guys which position will be best for you to be able to get that last pin out. So when I was trying to access that area to finally get into the trim so I could do the rear coilovers, I actually ran into an issue with the hardtop.
No! God, please, no!
So now I'm stuck with that. But for any of you guys that are going to be tracking your car or anything like that, I have a better suggestion that I should have done from the beginning. What I'm going to show you guys is I'm actually going to cut around a little circle at the top of that trim just for easy access to that coilover. That way you don't have to remove that trim every single time. So here's a Z4 as is. Right now the top is stuck. The button for the convertible top is blinking red. I think I'll make a separate video on this, me just diagnosing this and what I've learned and what I'm learning at the moment about these convertible tops. But I won't get too much into that because that's completely different than the coilovers right now. Right now, as an easy fix, I'm just charging up the battery because I noticed that it's at 40%. So that may be an easy fix. Who knows? Cross my fingers, but probably not. It's just worth a try. Anyways, back to the coilovers. This is what I'm talking about right here. I'm going to cut this bulge just for easy access with a Dremel. It might not be the prettiest, but imagine every time that you have to or want to adjust this, having to remove this entire panel and putting your top up like this to access the retaining clip back there. That's just not fun at all. I think this will be the best option. Same with the other side. I can do that right now with a Dremel. I'll cut it out and then you guys can see how it comes out. Definitely not the best looking thing I've done to this car, but the bulge still fits in there, so if you want to cover up that hole, you can still kind of fit it in there, and probably some of you can do a better job and make it look nicer, but it's a quick, easy access point now. So if I take this off, there are the bolts. So, I mean, it's up to you guys what you want to do, if you want to remove this entire panel every single time to adjust them, or just make this hole and try to make it look as best as you can. You can do either or. That was the hardest part about the rears, was accessing these rear shocks. But now that we have that hole, we can get those bolts out. So all we really have to do is unbolt the top nuts and that bottom bolt to the shock right there. I already sprayed it with some penetrant, so I'm just letting it soak for a little bit. Even though this car doesn't really see winter, so it really shouldn't be seized, I just sprayed it down just to make it easier. But I'm definitely going to go for the bottom bolt first. so that way the top nuts of the shock still support it so it doesn't just fall down. I actually already went ahead and did the other side, so this is the last side that I have to do for the rear coilovers. I did just want to go ahead and try to see if I ran into any issues before trying to film one of the sides, because like I told you guys, this is my first time doing coilovers specifically. But everything worked out pretty great, so I'm going to show you guys what I have. Basically, I have one of these scissor jacks that normally come in cars to change the flat tire on the side of the road, and then just a pry bar just so you're not using your fingers and you just want to be safe and not lose a finger. So I was just using a pry bar just for safety. But once we get to the point to remove the spring, I'm actually going to insert that scissor jack over here to the side. So on top of this, like this arm right here, and then the top is going to go up against the body here. So that's just going to push down on the assembly so that we can take the old spring out. Just a general summary of what we're going to do. We'll just go ahead and do step by step now. So I'm going to go ahead and get that bottom bolt loose off the shock and then go from there. Guys, also use a jack to support the bottom of the arm here. So that way that bolt for the shock is easier to remove. This puts a little bit of pressure up on the arm here just to make that bolt come out a lot easier. Also, you don't want to really mess up the threads or anything. So just make sure to do that before you start undoing that bolt. And just like that, the shock is now out. So we can move on to the next step of the spring. I'm going to go ahead and toss this. But that was pretty simple, as you can see right there. And down here, I'm still supporting that arm with the jack. So we're just going to keep that there for now. As you can see now, I released the pressure from the jack, so it's down lower. And I put the scissor jack in place now. Placed off to the side just enough that it won't really get in the way of me removing the spring. What we'll do is we'll keep adjusting the height of that scissor jack until we're able to remove the spring. Just for extra safety, use the pry bar to get the spring out. So I'll go ahead and do that now, and I'll update you guys once I have that spring out. The spring is now out. I took it out already, but I did want to mention to you guys that once it gets loose enough that you can wiggle the bottom, sometimes it'll get stuck on the top, so you might want to pry on the top a little bit to get it loose. It just tends to get really stuck up there, and it's not because there's not enough room. It's just been on there so long, so you might want to have to pry it off of the top just to get it out completely. Here we have the new coilover spring. There's a sticker up here, just letting you know that this side goes up. We'll take that off. Insert this, just be really careful and do your best to line this up with that center hole there. So try to get that center hole in the middle of this spring as best as possible. You should have pretty good tension with your scissor jack yet. So that's what I'm going to do. It's really hard to do with the camera in my hand, but as you can see, I have it sitting in there. I'm just going to use both of my hands to make sure that it's center, and then slowly relieve the pressure off the scissor jack so it goes up and lines up with the top as well. So everything is centered. Now, once you have the scissor jack out, it might look like this yet. As you can see, it's kind of off to the side and not on correctly. But that's because now we can use this other jack to put support on the bottom of the arm and help line it up a bit. You're not going to want to go all the way up because we still have to install the shock. So just get it up enough that it's fully seated. So I'll show you guys once I'm done with that. All right, we got support on the bottom here. And as you can see, we're pretty flush on the spring here, both on the top and the bottom. So we're ready to install the shock now. And you should have enough room now at the bottom that the bolt will line up with the hole. But I'm going to go ahead and put it in and just show you guys how that looks once I have the shock in. The easiest way to install the shock with one person is to kind of hug the corner of the car. So with your left hand, grab the top of the shock there. And then with your other hand, have a bolt ready to screw onto the top of the stud of the shock, and that'll just make it easier to do with one person. So I have the top nuts on all three of those studs just kind of hand tight, so it can still move a little bit. And the reason for that is because we still have to put on the bottom bolt. So we're going to line that up, and if I have to raise the jack up a little bit more to line up that bolt, we'll do that, and that's okay. But we're pretty much almost done here with the rear. So everything is just snug right now. The top nuts and the bottom bolt. I'm going to go ahead and torque them to spec. So what we're going to do is these top ones are the 35 Newton meters, and the bottom bolt will be 81 Newton meters. I'm going to go ahead and get those torqued down and then should be ready to go. Both sides are now completely done. I'll show you each side here. Kind of what they're looking like now. Everything's torqued down. So the next step now is going to be putting on the wheels and then dropping the weight on the rear end of the vehicle to see how it sits. I'm kind of anxious to see how low it sits with the ride height that it's at right now. I know it should be pretty close to stock, but I'm not 100% sure. So it might actually end up sitting a lot lower, but we'll find out. The car is now sitting on the ground. I took out the jack, and you can see how low it's sitting. Actually not very low, pretty damn close to stock height. Just a little bit lower, I would say. I could still adjust it, but I do have some meaty tires on this, and I'm running a really low offset. So I'm not sure if I'm going to lower it anymore, especially with the roads here. But it's pretty decent for now. And as always, when you get new suspension, you're going to want to get an alignment, especially if you're doing all-around suspension. So I'm going to be doing that as well, and maybe I'll end up adjusting it a little bit more, but it won't be too much more of a difference than what it's at right now. So now that the rear is done, I can go ahead and move on to the front. So what I'm going to do is now I'll go ahead and kind of move the car a bit and adjust the positioning of it so I can jack up the front and put it on jack stands. Front wheel is off now. I sprayed penetrant on the bottom bolt here, both sides, so it's soaking. Same with the sway bar end links right there, sprayed penetrant, and on the bottom too. So they're just soaking right now, but I'm getting ready to get these bolts out as well so I can swap out this front coilover. And then you can see the bolts up here, just like a regular one, but it's a McPherson strut if I'm correct. So it's more of a clamp around the strut right now. So it clamps it in place. Before dropping the suspension and taking out the old strut, make sure to unclip this headlight leveling sensor from here so that it doesn't break when you loosen the suspension and it drops to take out the strut. So then also make sure to put it back into place in the same exact spot once you have the new coilover in. And this is only on the passenger side, so you won't see this on the driver's side. But I'm going to go ahead and get those 3 bolts out, and that should be it. You just want to be careful with all these wires. There's an ABS sensor, your brake lines, and everything like that. So just make sure that they get out of the way, because once you get this loose and this starts to slide off, it's going to put tension on those wires. So if you want, you can undo them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be very careful, and I have another jack stand here, so I'm going to put that underneath to support it so that it doesn't just completely rip that wire. I believe that's the ABS one that you see right there. But yeah, I'll get started on this. It's going to be a little tedious. I know a lot of people say that the fronts are the easiest, but I don't know what they're talking about. Maybe it's because it's a different style of strut as the McPherson that makes it a lot easier. But I think the fronts are harder, especially if it's this McPherson one, just because it's a lot of adjusting, especially when you're installing the sway bar end links, making sure that the coilover is adjusted correctly so that everything lines up, because you want to make sure that all the holes are lined up once you get the new one in. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I'm going to start and get this going. Those 3 bolts are now off. They were really easy to get off, especially if you guys own one of these M18 Milwaukee 1/2-inch impact guns. It makes everything a lot easier. This has definitely been my best friend whenever I try to get any bolts that are super torqued down. Recommend you guys getting something like this, especially when you get to these kinds of jobs. Also, one of these electric long reach ratchets are really helpful. Anyways, now we're to the point where, like I told you guys, this kind of pinches the strut. We're going to go ahead and use one of these pry bars to kind of pry that open just a little bit more, and this will start to fall out of here. And if you guys are having even more trouble and it does move but not all the way, you can actually go ahead and just start kicking this and trying to get it out completely. It's perfectly fine. The only thing that you will worry about is these wires, so make sure that they're out of the way. Like, I kind of pushed them to the side over here. Same with this one over here, this little bracket that goes in between here. It goes in the front, but I just moved it in the back to get it out of the way. So I'll go ahead and pry on that and then start kicking this basically just to get this fully out. And then once that's done, I'll show you guys the next step. This is what you guys will end up with now. You can see that the strut is completely out. So you can see where the wire can get in the way and get damaged. That's why you might want to disconnect it. I'm just lazy right now, but if you guys want to be extra careful, you can disconnect that wire. You can see where it hooks up right there. That strut is now completely out, and we can go ahead and move on to the top here with the little nuts on the top holding it. So they're still holding it for support. So the best way to get these out is, again, kind of hug the edge of the vehicle, hold the strut, and get these nuts off so then we can finally remove the entire strut. As you guys can see, the BC Racing Coilover is in. I got it in place here, and I got the nuts on. So basically what I did is I held it with one hand, pushed it up, and just got the nuts started. So they're not on all the way, and this isn't fully in place, or I should say this isn't really actually fully seated yet. And that is because I have to get that large bolt back in on the bottom, but it's going to be easier with 2 people. I would recommend having somebody help you and lift up on the rotor to make sure that it's fully seated before you put that big bolt in. And we still also have to put the sway bar link in, so make sure you line that up correctly here. I'm sorry, the camera's getting out of focus here. So there's the old one, so make sure that your new one lines up with the old one because it's got a specific orientation just because of that sway bar end link and how it's placed. Same with the hole that's over here where it's supposed to go. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that sway bar end link in, line it up, kind of get the bolts started, but not fully torqued. And that's why I told you guys that it's very tedious work. You're going to be going back and forth. So not fully completing one part at a time just because you want to get everything seated correctly. So I'll show you guys basically the end product. But like I said, once you got everything lined up and this fully seated, hopefully with some help, then everything can be torqued down. So double check your work, make sure everything is fully seated. I know I'm saying that word a lot, but it means a lot. And as you can see, if you're having trouble with this coilover, it's pretty easy to install because you'll see that this notch goes a certain way, as you'll notice with the old one that you took off. But there's also a notch in the back. Hopefully you guys can see that. I want to show you guys because it's really important to see. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Sweet. So as you know, there's like I would say a little shark fin that tells you where to mount this coilover. So you know that that shark fin goes towards the back where it's getting pinched. So just in case you guys were wondering, just like me, if it's your first time with a coilover, that'll help you with orientation. So I thought I'd mention that. But I'll get started on this, and just like I said, just follow the steps like me and get everything lined up. Initially, to get this coilover in here, I had to really shorten it just to make it easier to pop back into the mounting area. So now you can see that the sway bar end link is a little bit a ways from the sway bar down there. You can see that hole where that sway bar end link is supposed to go in. So now I have to lengthen the coilover. In order to adjust that, I loosen the bottom collar, which helps set the coilover height. So you can see it's way up here. If I want to loosen it, you go counterclockwise. If you want to set it, you go clockwise and make sure it's tight on the bottom, so locked in place. So I grab the smaller spanner wrench here, and I can put it onto this other locking collar up here, not the bigger one, but the smaller one, and I can actually rotate it counterclockwise, and by doing so, it's lengthening the coilover. So I'm going to keep doing that until I'm able to line up the sway bar end link to that hole. Once I get that lined up and I can get those bolts tightened on both sides, so the top bolt here and the bottom bolt for the sway bar end link, then I can go ahead and go back to adjusting the coilover to whatever height that I'd like. The coilover has been lengthened enough now that the sway bar end link goes into both holes properly, and I just started the nuts on both ends here, so you can see that it's in there and over here into this mount. And then I also have the bolts started on the pinch where it pinches the coilover, so you can see that the bolts right there and the nuts on the other side just hand tight for now. But this is where you could use another person. You're going to want somebody to pull up on the rotor to make sure that the coilover is seated in here. There's a little edge on the coilover that tells you when it's in deep enough, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to have someone pull up, and then I'm going to torque that bolt down as well as the sway bar end links here. And you're going to also want to be careful because on these sway bar end links, as you'll notice, that aftermarket or upgraded sway bar links won't have that place on the other end where you hold the box wrench on the other side and tighten the nut to disassemble and install sway bar end links. This one you can see inside. Hopefully the camera focuses here. You can see an Allen bolt there. So on this one, you're going to want to use a box wrench on the bolt and then an Allen key in the middle to tighten these. So be careful when doing that because they're different style sway bar end links. In order to get a good starting point for my height in the front of the coilovers, I'm going to go ahead and use a tape measure to measure from the top of the strut all the way down to this old mark that you see here. Right there, you can kind of see it. Yours will show up the same as well. And from there, it's about 18 inches. So that's what I'm going to measure on the coilover. So I'm going to keep threading it until it's got about that length. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to measure from the bottom here, this base, all the way up to the top hat, just to get a good starting point. And I'm going to do that on both ends. But everything is tight and torqued down, so now it's just a matter of getting a zero, so to say. But I'm not going to be fully adjusting the coilovers and really going for my height yet. This is just the installation. Well, guys, I'm glad that I ended up going with 17 inches instead of 18 inches for the height of the coilover, because look at this. I still have some monster truck fitment here in the front. And I think maybe my front struts were starting to fail and sag because, I mean, those were 18 and my fitment wasn't even close to that bad. But regardless, we're going to go ahead and adjust that in the next video. For now, the coilovers are installed all around, so we got that installation process done. I know what you guys are thinking. But this video is dragging on, and probably adjusting the coilovers and getting the desired height for this car that I want is probably going to take another 30 minutes of video. Just me explaining the fronts and the rears to adjust them to the proper height. So I'm going to do that on the next video. For now, this installation is complete, so you guys know how to install the coilovers on the Z4 E89 specifically. And I know there aren't very many videos. It was definitely hard for me to find any showing coilovers on this specific platform. Hopefully this helps someone out there that has the E89 and is trying to do this. But I'll catch you guys on the flip side.